Raising Us is sponsored by Nugget, makers of the original Play Couch.
I would advocate for learning about civic education beginning in preschool and, continuing all the way through high school so that when students do graduate, they have a very solid understanding of the basics.
Parenting doesn't come with a script, but it does come with lots of questions. I'm Elise Hu, journalist, mom, and your host for Raising Us, a podcast from A Kids Co. Every week, we break down big, timely topics so you can have honest, meaningful conversations with your kid. Because these conversations, they matter. And every time we show up for them, we're not just raising thoughtful kids, we're raising us, too. Support for this podcast comes from Quince. Quince has it all. $50 Mongolian cashmere sweaters made for everyday wear. There's denim that never goes out of style, silk tops and skirts that add polish, and there's down outerwear built to take on the season. It's great for gifting or upgrading your own wardrobe. By working directly with ethical top-tier factories, Quince skips the middlemen and offers prices 50% less than similar brands. I have really trusted Quince for my 100% washable silk tops. They're great to dress up. They're great to dress down. It's the holiday season, so I have one in red that's going to be great for all sorts of Christmas cocktail parties. Quince has something for everyone on your list, and not just wardrobe pieces. There's also housewares, like I have a duvet set from Quince, and candles as well. Step into the holiday season with layers made to feel good, look polished, and last from Quince. Perfect for gifting or keeping for yourself. Go to quince.com/raisingus for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. Now available in Canada, too. That's QUINCE.com/raisingus to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/raisingus. A lot of times we talk about democracy like it's just a big thing that happens every 4 years. You go vote, you see who wins, and move on. But democracy, of course, is so much more than just elections. It's about how we show up for each other every single day. It's about how we listen, speak up, and work through disagreements, even when it's tough. And let's be honest, especially now in 2025, politics feel pretty intense. Families are talking about huge issues at the dinner table. Online debates are more heated than ever before, and so many people feel frustrated and divided about what's happening in our country. It's no wonder sometimes we feel unsure about raising our voices or figuring out the best ways to get involved. But that's exactly why these conversations matter. We want our kids to know their voices can make a difference. And even if we sometimes feel like we're still learning our way ourselves, just by having these honest talks, we're teaching our kids that democracy isn't about being perfect or having all the answers. It's about trying, listening, and showing up for one another. On today's episode of Raising Us, we're talking about democracy with Sharon McMahon. She's an award-winning educator, the founder and editor-in-chief of the newsletter The Pre-Amble, and the host of the podcast, Here's Where It Gets Interesting. She's also the #1 New York Times bestselling author of The Small and the Mighty. Together, we'll explore how families can talk about democracy, get involved in their own communities, and help kids develop the skills to participate, no matter what their age. Okay, Sharon McMahon, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. Happy to be here.
You have taught government across various states. As a teacher, what stood out to you about how kids actually experience the government?
Well, when I was teaching in the DC area, national government is local news.
Right.
So their proximity to national government is very different there. And many of their families work for the national government. They work for, Health and Human Services. They work at the Pentagon. The federal government is a major employer in the DC area. So when you're talking about the proximity to power,
Hmm.
the students in DC experience it very differently than students in the upper Midwest. I'm from northern Minnesota,
Yeah.
and our perception of what government is and what government does is perhaps different than if your parents actually work for the thing that's on the news.
Right. Right.
This is true of everything, actually. Your perception of an issue changes the closer you get to it.
Hmm.
And I'm sure you've heard the saying that it's hard to hate people up
Right.
close. The same is true of organizations. That you might hate them more because you're up close. You might understand them better if you're up close, but your perception of what they are and what they do changes when you're close up.
Of course, not everybody can grow up in Washington, D.C. and be sort of in and around and have that kind of proximity to government. So, as a teacher and outside of what the kids learn in school, how do parents out there help children, wherever they are, understand the role of government better?
Mm. Well, it's a really important question, and it's something that I have experienced that a lot of parents who are adults today feel like I never got a good education
Oh.
on this topic when I was in high school. And they have I really do think one of the reasons that my content has resonated with people
Hmm.
is because they realize that they'd never learned this
Wow.
and that this is impacting their daily life. This is not some random trigonometry questions where it's like, listen, I do hair, I can ignore it. You know what I mean? The politics is in every single aspect of our lives. And so if we don't get a good education on the topic when we're growing up, it makes it much more difficult for us to impart that information to our own children. Or we might be imparting information to them that we think is correct but actually is not correct. Let me give you one example. When I was growing up, my parents were actually quite smart people, but they didn't go to college,
Hmm.
and they didn't really, I think they thought they did, but they didn't actually really understand some complicated government topics.
Hmm.
When I bring this example up, so many people tell me that their parents and teachers told them the same thing, which is that China owns almost all of the United States' national debt, and that at any moment, China could just call in the debt and be like, we own you now. That was a very, very commonly taught thing in schools and in families,
Wow.
that China owns the United States' national debt. And when I bring this up, people are like, I totally learned that. It was absolutely what my teachers or parents told me. Now, foreign governments do own some of the United States'
Right.
debt, and
Right.
China is one of those
Right.
countries, but they do not own the majority of the United States' debt, nor can they, air quotes, call it in.
Right.
Where you're like, give me the money now.
Right.
Like that's not how it works.
Right.
So that's just an example of how people might be unwittingly passing along information that they heard from what they thought was a reputable source, their
Yeah.
teacher or their mom.
Yeah.
And so they then teach that to their children. So all that to preface this idea that a lot of people now realize they didn't get a great government education, and they realize how important it now is, because we are reaping the fruits that we have, of the seeds we have sown
Yep.
for many decades of under prioritizing civic education in the United States. We spend about 5 cents per student on civic education in the United States every year. And we spend about $50 per student on STEM topics.
Hmm.
And yet, trigonometry may not be affecting your daily life, but politics are.
Right.
So when I think about how parents might approach talking about government to their children, I think the first thing is that we need to be doing it early and often.
Yeah.
I would advocate for learning about civic education beginning in preschool and continuing all the way through high school, so that when students do graduate, they have a very solid understanding of the basics.
As a civics content creator now, where are you finding the links, the missing links for folks, the basics that a lot of your audience may not understand or didn't understand until they came to you?
The federal bureaucracy is very complicated. It's huge. The relationship between Congress, the president, the rest of the executive branch, the judicial branch,
Yeah.
they have been told, here's how it's supposed to work. The executive branch is supposed to be able to check the power of the legislative branch and the judicial branch. Like we learned in Schoolhouse Rock
Right,
that
right,
there's a way that things are supposed to work, but it doesn't always work that way, it seems, in practice.
right. How do parents strike a balance when we want our kids, especially our elementary aged kids and younger, to be able to be kids, right? Children should get to play and experience the world and be curious. But at the same time, the world around us is mediated through government and leadership decisions and politics. How do we strike that balance between sort of the world we live in now and then allowing our kids to grow up and ideally joyfully?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And I know, again, it's something I think a lot of people struggle with. And they even struggle with it as adults of like, am I supposed to go to the birthday party
Right.
when the following horrific things are happening on the other side of the world? Am I supposed to celebrate Christmas when there's the starving children?
Children.
Like it's legitimately a question that adults wrestle with.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that I would say is, and I say this to an adult as well, that there is a difference between noticing, caring, doing all you can to help, and allowing a situation that is beyond your control to completely consume your life
Mm,
and to diminish your own ability to impact the world because you are so overcome with anxiety and
mm,
um, paralyzed by indecision. The world actually doesn't need more people to be paralyzed by anxiety.
mm.
That is not helping anyone, and that includes our children. So I do think it's important to answer children's questions as they come up, to tell them honestly what is going on. Children can handle more truth than we
Yeah.
realize.
Yeah.
Um, have you ever experienced have you ever watched like the old Disney movies or like the movies, maybe children's movies you grew up with, and you're like, they let children watch this?
A lot of
Do you know
parents
what I mean?
die in Disney
Yes.
films, for
So
example.
Bambi's mom is just shot
Yes.
out back. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Um, the level of darkness in older children's books and movies like Grimm's fairy tales, like So Hansel and Gretel, like the witch in the candy cottage, like is eating the children.
Right.
Like that seems
Oh boy.
ridiculous.
Uh-huh.
You're right. But there's a lot of psychological research about how using that sort of medium, like that sort of fantasy element, allows children to work through, difficult concepts and difficult emotions in sort of a controlled way.
Yeah.
So I do think that it's important to make sure that things are age appropriate,
Mhm.
that we're not overburdening our 5-year-old with the world being on fire on,
Right.
on a daily basis, especially when they can't control it.
Right.
But also understanding that they can handle age appropriate truth.
Mhm.
They can understand that something is happening in an age appropriate way. Um, but what we don't want is for our own anxieties to run away with us to the
Mm.
extent that they begin to impact and infect our own children
Yeah.
who are not in the position to impact government policy
Right.
and deserve the opportunity to grow up, to first be children before being saddled with the responsibility of like, what am I supposed to do about this dumpster fire of the United States government?
Well, before
Mhm.
we even get into specific issues of this dumpster fire, how do we set a framework or talk to the kids just about political division and the fact that, we as their parents might believe something very different than what their teachers believe or what their friends' parents might believe?
That is tough to navigate, especially with kids in classrooms and some groups having really different beliefs than your own family values.
Right.
I think it's important to teach children how you would want them to be treated. And I know that that just sounds very trite, but let's say you come from a same-sex family
Mhm.
and your child has two moms. What you would want from a child in their second grade classroom who maybe had different beliefs, whose religious background said that, we don't approve of that. What you would want from that child is for them to respect your child. You don't need that second grader's stamp of approval of like, well, I approve of you, so your life's legitimate. Like you don't need their approval to do what to have validity. But what you do want is for that child to respect your child and to treat them with kindness as a member of the community in the classroom, right? That's what you would hope, that they're not going to be made fun of so the opposite is also true. You wouldn't want to teach your children that somebody whose, political beliefs that you believe are, say, bigoted, you wouldn't want to teach your children to be cruel to them.
Right.
Because how is that any better than the opposite being true?
Kids often take the political opinions or favorite sports teams of their parents. And I
Mhm.
mention sports teams because politics these days can often mirror that. Like, well, this is my team. And so therefore I root against your team instead of
Mhm.
a more kind of collective and cooperative approach. How do we encourage our kids to hold more compassion and nuance when it comes to political beliefs and not
Mm.
treat it like fandom, which is what we've
Mm.
seen so much?
This is a topic that I think some adults struggle with. We did not teach this to kids 25 years ago, and so consequently adults don't know this. Some
Yeah.
adults don't know this today,
Yeah.
which is that two things can be true at the same time. This idea of like very black and white, either or, me or you, they won, they lost, red team, blue team,
Right.
who won the World Series. This zero sum thinking of in order for me to win, you have to lose. That mindset has become very pervasive
Yep.
in the United States. And that mindset is not one in which, is not a fertile soil in which progress grows.
So this goes back to the question then, how do we encourage nuance? How do we encourage breaking down that just either or kind of thinking?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's explicitly telling our children two things can be true at the same time. That's not a message that kids hear very often. It's a message that we need to model for them.
Yeah.
Like you actually can want to be friends with so and so in your class, and also that child was mean to somebody else today at lunch. I also think it's useful to think about things in terms of, a most generous interpretation.
Mm,
And this is also a knee jerk default that the human brain does not really come wired with.
mm.
We're very hardwired for negativity because negativity has kept humans alive for
Yeah.
millennia.
Yeah.
We, we pay far more attention to negative information. That's just truly a survival instinct. We don't need to pay careful attention to the robins chirping on the branch. We already have habituated that information and know they're no threat to me.
Mhm.
So I don't need to like what and pay careful attention to the pleasant thing that's happening.
Mm.
I need to pay careful attention to is that a wolf?
Yeah.
What did I just see in the shadows?
Right.
So our brains are very hardwired to pay attention to negativity. The good news though is that we can flex our muscles to, sort of override that negativity bias of if they disagree with you, they're bad.
Yeah.
And we can learn to flex the muscles of just because someone disagrees doesn't necessarily mean that they are a bad person. And there might be reasons that they believe something that you're not even aware of.
Yeah.
And what would happen if they believe that thing because their mom was killed in a car accident? And so consequently, they have beliefs that you don't understand the origins of.
Yeah.
What if we think to ourselves, instead of getting mad at the person who doesn't put the shopping cart away at the grocery store and just leaves it there, we can immediately, our knee jerk is they're an inconsiderate jerk.
Right.
They're an inconsiderate jerk.
Yeah.
And I will admit that's my knee jerk reaction. Like, put your ding dang cart back.
I get very
Like,
annoyed about the trays at TSA, when
Mhm.
people don't put the trays back.
Yes. Well, you're just leaving them all out here. Put it back in the pile. Yes. What if the most generous interpretation, though, was that that person um, just got really bad news that their mom died? And they were just like so overcome with emotion that they were not even paying attention to their surroundings. They were just trying to like not break down in public. What if the most generous interpretation is that they have a sick child at home
Yeah.
and they are just trying to get home to them as quickly as possible? We can choose which kind of interpretation we want to view the world through.
Yeah.
And the most generous interpretation is not always appropriate, but it does help us see the world just generally with more compassion.
And this is
And to
something we can teach
act
our kids, is what you're saying
right,
too.
exactly. We can model what that looks like. We can explicitly verbalize what it is that we're thinking, like our own thought process when we're experiencing it. This is a lot of how, children learn things is we just talk them through it. If you think about like, I'm teaching you to cook, I'm teaching you to bake a cake.
Yeah.
We don't just set out the ingredients and stand there while our child does nothing. We narrate them through the entire process.
Mhm.
Okay, now take this and scoop up the flour and then take a little knife and level it across. Okay, dump it in the bowl. Like we're literally narrating for them and helping them engage in the activities that they don't know how to do. And there are many activities that are happening in our own brain that we could probably benefit from narrating for our children. I am
Mm.
really annoyed that that person didn't put their cart back.
Yeah.
And I'm going to tell myself right now, maybe they are X.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm going to choose to believe today. We could just narrate that for our children, and that would probably go a long way.
We started this conversation talking about the importance of proximity in learning about government, and that kids, for example, in Washington, D.C., have that innate proximity because they're near or in the nation's capital. If civics education continues to be underfunded and under-resourced, and parents want to get their kids that kind of proximate education, what are ways that parents can get their kids more civically involved, even when they're
Mm,
small?
mm. Yeah, I mean, local government is the most impactful level of government. We hear a lot on the news today about Medicaid and Medicare and Social Security and cuts to these big national programs. And make no mistake, those are important national programs that people should know about.
Mhm.
But the level of government that impacts your daily life the most
Yeah,
is your local government.
right.
And the good news is that local government is often extremely accessible. I live like 1 mile from I live in a small town, 1 mile from my city hall.
Yeah.
And the government of my little tiny town posts on Facebook,
Oh.
their meeting agenda
Mhm.
of like, we're
Mhm.
having a meeting Tuesday at 7, if anyone wants to come. So I'm not saying you have to take your kid to every single government meeting that's ever existed. But when children learn that government is actually just run by normal people,
Yeah.
sometimes not even very qualified people, just run by a bunch of like, oh, you do that? I think it can help demystify a lot of what we think is happening.
Mm.
Because again, children's view of who is in power is often based on this like fairy tale notion of some kind of king with like
Mm.
like a
Mhm.
magic wand or a sword or something where they just say it and it happens. And when they realize that, no, it's Teresa. It's Teresa who works at City Hall. The lady with the fall leaves on her sweater. Yeah, no, she's in charge of that.
Yeah.
When kids see that, they're like, "Oh, Pam."
And then could there be a hopeful or optimistic lens on that too? Because when they see
Mhm,
it's Pam,
mhm.
they could also be Pam or be in Pam's position.
Exactly,
How might we be
exactly.
able to inspire our kids to get involved and want a
Mhm,
seat at the table, maybe even at
mhm.
younger ages?
Yeah,
Because that's kind of the
I,
issue with our government, right? There's such a gap, generations, often like many generations removed from our kids, who's in
mhm,
charge. So
mhm.
is there a way to have them exposed to government that in a way that inspires them to take part?
Yeah. I love that idea of like, yes, when you realize it's literally just Pam in an office, clicking yes on a checkbox in a computer system. You know what I mean? Like that's how you get a permit to do something.
Mhm.
Um, the idea that like, oh, if she can do it, I could totally do it. I didn't
Yeah.
need to be like born into it. I don't need to be a billionaire. I do think it's worth it to help our kids learn how to write a letter to an elected official, how to
Oh,
find the information of who to send a letter to.
yeah.
This is a skill that a lot of adults don't have. They wouldn't even know how to look up who represents them in their city council.
Yeah.
They wouldn't even know how to look up who is in their state legislature that represents their district.
Good point.
When they voted, if they voted, they just probably voted for the people on the side of the ticket that they align with. That's most often what happens at a local and state government level. So the skills of how to find this information, that
Mhm.
really helps demystify things. And that can also, again, empower children to feel like, oh, I can totally go to that meeting. I can write a letter to somebody, to the school board saying, please don't cut our music
Yeah.
program.
Yeah.
It's really important to, my friends and I, and help them figure out where to send that letter. Like a handwritten letter from a third grader, the school board member is going to open that.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're going to open that. How to even send an email or make a phone call.
Right.
These are not just short-term academic skills. These are lifelong skills. And I'll say, like, during the civil rights movement, when there was a big move, a big societal movement to help, especially Black Americans, be able to access polls when they had specifically been denied the
Yeah.
right to vote for so long. One of the first things that they needed to do was gain access to literacy skills that they had been intentionally denied. And so there were programs that were developed called things like Citizenship School that helped adults who had been denied access to literacy learn how to read and write. But one of the first things they learned how to do was identify who represented them in government
Hmm.
and how to write them a letter.
Yeah.
That was truly like on the early agenda of, at the end of Citizenship School, you will learn how to find out who the mayor is, find out how to write the mayor a letter.
Yeah.
And people were very excited by the opportunity to address the people that represented them in government. The idea that they had never had the opportunity to write a letter to a mayor or a congressperson, that represented a huge change for them. So don't underestimate the power of exercising your First Amendment right to petition the government, meaning
Right.
write them a letter or call them
Yeah.
about something that's important to you.
It could be as simple as that. That's such a great
Mhm.
actionable takeaway already, and in an episode full of actionable takeaways. But before we let you go, Sharon McMahon, are there any other things that you want to leave parents with when it comes to helping our children understand our democracy and our role in it?
Mm. I think it's important to know that democracy is more than voting. That we think democracy is like, oh, the people vote. And yes, leaders chosen by the people, that is a very important aspect of democracy. But I think it's important that we teach our children that healthy democracies require citizen participation in a variety of different ways,
Yeah.
and that none of us has to do all of the ways. Let me tell you, I am not the person who is out every weekend doing the protests.
Right. Right.
Other people can protest if they want to. I am out here making videos on the internet. Like I have a different job. And it's great that some people's jobs are X and other people's jobs are Y. That's how society is set up. That's how humans are made to work together, is that some of us can have this job and some of us can have this job. So taking stock in the variety of different types of ways one can even participate, I think is a really helpful thing for children to grow up learning,
Mhm.
that it's not just about voting. There's a great book written by Emily Amick and Sammy Sage called Democracy in Retrograde. And one of the
I read
things
it.
one of the things I like about that book is you don't even realize how many different ways there are to be involved
Right. Right.
in democracy. And they actually have some little like personality quizzes and things like that about ways that you might be involved. So just helping your own children to realize all the different ways they might be involved, so that they can grow up feeling like they play an important and integral role more than once every 4 years.
Yeah.
More than just like going to the voting booth every couple of years and checking a box. And it's much more than that.
And it makes it so much richer and more exciting too.
Mm-hmm.
Sharon McMahon, thank you so much for spending some time with us. Big thanks to Sharon McMahon for joining us. And remember, every small action, question, and conversation helps kids see what it means to get involved and care about their own communities. The more we show up and stay curious about our own government and how it's run, the more we can understand how we can make it work better for us and everyone around us. For more tools and resources, visit us at akidsco.com. Thanks for listening to Raising Us. If this episode resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe and follow us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or wherever else you listen. Raising Us is sponsored by Nugget.